Welcome, everyone, to today's Safety Roundtable session. We're going to be talking today about the hierarchy of controls. And it looks like this is a very popular session based on the number of people registering on the Safety Roundtable Zoom. So welcome to you for joining us today. And we'll delve into this topic, which I think is one that has obviously hit a bit of a nerve and captured some attention. So we look forward to joining in the discussion with you on this topic. So we're going to explore the hierarchy of controls, and we're going to challenge it a bit. So we're going to look at, are there any areas that could be improved upon? Are there any areas that perhaps it's not fit for purpose, and things of that nature? If you haven't joined one of these sessions before, the Safety Roundtable happens every 2 weeks on Wednesday lunchtime, starting at 12:30. Every single session is different, so I'm always here with you, but sometimes I have a guest, sometimes more than one guest, and we talk about different topics all the time. So it's not just about the same thing again and again and again. And the idea is that it's an open and interactive discussion. So today I'm going to talk for 10 or 15 minutes about the hierarchy of control, and then we're going to open it up, and it just becomes not a free-for-all because we try and control it, but it's very much an open discussion. So the best experience is to come and join us on the Zoom, where you can, if you want to, go to reactions, raise your hand, and I'll ask you to unmute and you can come and join in the discussion. If you're following this online on LinkedIn, for example, then engage in the chat, and I'll do my best if you've got any questions or comments to pick up on those as we go through. Do invite your fellow safety professionals, colleagues, friends, etc., to join as well on future sessions. So let's just start then with an overview of the hierarchy of controls, just to set the scene here. So there are 5 stages in the hierarchy: elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and PPE. And the concept of this is that whenever we're looking at the potential for physical harm, we should work our way through the hierarchy, starting at the top and ending at the bottom. So elimination is physically removing the hazard. Substitution is replacing the hazard. Engineering controls are things that can isolate people from the hazard. Administrative controls would be changing the way that we're doing work to reduce the risk. And then PPE is obviously protection of the worker by providing them with PPE. So that's what the hierarchy is and what it kind of means. I thought I'd just give you an example of this from my world of slip safety. So if we think about trying to prevent slipping accidents from happening in the workplace, what can we do on elimination? Well, the cause of a slip is that a floor is both slippery, but also that it's contaminated with water or other types of contamination. A floor can be slippery, but if it's not contaminated, then obviously it's not slippery, because clean and dry floors are not slippery. So if we want to eliminate the risk of a slip, then you would look at keeping floors and feet that are stepping onto floors dry. Simple as that. If they're dry, free of contamination, then they won't be slippery. Substitution, we could think about things like using materials that promote better slip safety. So, for example, there are products you can use to clean floors that make floors less slippery and are less slippery in use. We could do things like anti-slip treatments as well. Engineering controls, can we just keep people off of wet floors? There's a famous case where someone slipped, a man called Stanley May slipped in a co-op store in Truro, he banged his head and he sadly passed away. And the co-op was fined criminally by Cornwall Council after that case. And one of the things they said was, that floor should have been, or access to that floor, sorry, should have been precluded. Administrative controls. This is all about how we work. So I talk a lot about the human factors of slips. If we can reduce the need for people to be twisting, turning, pushing, pulling, carrying, rushing, etc., that can reduce the risk of slips. PPE, we could provide slip-resistant footwear. So that's a run-through of the hierarchy from a slip perspective. But I suppose when I look at this, I think, is that enough? And does it really apply to members of the public in the same way that it does members of staff? Obviously, PPE is not relevant for members of the public. And also, when I think about slips, what I tend to see is that the hierarchy gets turned on its head. So people tend to start with the PPE, the slip-resistant footwear. Now, is that because they start with that, or is that because they have considered the other phases and written them off? Is an interesting question and one we can discuss. But the upshot is that we seem to be overly relying on PPE. So I did a post on LinkedIn recently, just giving some thoughts or potential challenges and potential drawbacks to the hierarchy of controls. So I thought I would just run through these quickly as a way of promoting some discussion. And then, as mentioned, we want this to be nice and interactive. So keen for you guys to share your views as well. So the first thing I thought about was a potential over-reliance on the lower level controls. What do I mean by this? That PPE can often be seen as a quick fix, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate the hazard. It's providing a barrier between the hazard and the worker. So having a reliance on PPE can lead to complacency, false sense of security, and therefore can potentially increase risk exposure. And then we also need to think about human error. So if we're depending on PPE and administrative controls, then there is a lot of variability there, human behavior. We're all fallible as humans. So non-compliance, improper use, maintenance lapses, any other number of human errors could reduce their effectiveness and therefore lead to higher accident rates. Let me know your thoughts on this in the chat. And if you're on the Zoom and you want to come and chat with me about this, then go to reactions, raise your hand, and I'll call you up. The second thing that I thought of was, is the hierarchy inadequate in terms of addressing complex risks? So I'm a big fan of frameworks, and I use them a lot in my approaches to life, to business, etc. But does the hierarchy risk oversimplifying the complexity of certain types of workplace hazards that maybe need a bit more nuance? It's a question to be asked. And complex risks often need a blend of controls. So you might have engineering modifications, behavioral changes, redesigning of work processes. And does the hierarchy kind of support or encourage this kind of integration of solutions? Are we looking at it in too linear a way? Derek said in the chat, just finished a health and safety induction. When I showed them the hierarchy of control triangle, many said, if I can't eliminate the task, then what tools, as in PPE, do I need? So in other words, they did turn the triangle upside down, and Pauline has also said, agreed, everyone goes straight to PPE. The third thing I thought of was that potentially this approach might hinder innovation. So if we're sticking very much to this regimented framework, um, are we stifling creativity? Are we discouraging the search for innovative safety solutions that might exist outside of these kind of traditional categories? And is it a bit inflexible? So might people be very wedded to we've got to do it this way? We've got to stick to this structure. We've got to stick to this process. And might that be a net negative? Many construction sites have blanket approaches to PPE and sometimes do not consider the overall hierarchy, says William. Yeah, great point. Sterren, is it not up to us as H&S professionals to challenge this perception and re-educate? Absolutely. That's the idea of today's discussion, really, is to have this discussion among ourselves and then go away, learn, and take away that and talk to non-safety professionals about it. Can we have the recording? Absolutely, the recording will definitely be available. Mike, you put your hand up. Do you want to join in?
Yes, please. I just think it's not actually a failure of the hierarchy of controls, because if you look at the hierarchy controls and the way it's set out, is you're supposed to go through them in order. I think it is a failure of people to apply the hierarchy correctly, is what we've got here, rather than a failure of the hierarchy itself. It's people applying it incorrectly.
Yeah.
I also thought about your hierarchy for slips, and surely elimination would be to stop people walking altogether rather
Well, I
than
suppose you could. Yeah,
dry surface.
you could look at that. I suppose this is one of the things, isn't it? You can think about it philosophically around elimination, and you could say, well, we can eliminate all risks if we eliminate all activity of any kind. But I was sort of thinking, well, that was perhaps a little bit too over the top, and maybe we should think about eliminating the floors from being wet because, yeah, or contaminated. Obviously, if we've got a floor that's dry, then it's not going to be a risk. So I thought that was probably a little bit more reasonable, shall we say, when it comes to elimination. Um, good stuff. We've got some hands going up. I just want to make sure I'm giving people. Claire, do you want to come in?
Hi, yeah. Yeah, I was actually having a very similar conversation today actually about PPE and what's appropriate and what isn't. And we were talking about, whether we go with a blanket, everybody must wear this for a particular area or not. And I suppose it comes down to, we've gone through the hierarchy of control. We've looked at trying to, engineer it out and what have you. And there are just certain things that we just physically can't remove from the work process. So our only option now is to look at PPE. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that quite often PPE just seems to be, it's the quick all fix all. We'll just use that because it's easier. And then in the long term, actually, it's not, because it's expensive and it's not cost effective because you have to replace items all the time. So yeah, I think I agree with, I think it was the chappie on before, that it just seems to be the go-to. It's the easy fix.
Yeah,
So
and I think sometimes there is a lack of awareness, understanding, etc., around what some of these solutions could well be. So I think people
yeah,
sometimes
they
will
always seem
write
to
off,
think,
yeah, we can't eliminate it. Well, have we really gone
have we really thought about it?
deep?
And
Yeah.
also the other thing is, quite often I come up across the barrier of, oh, but that's really expensive. Yes, it is, but it's not, because when you look at the next 10 years worth of life of that piece of equipment, and then you look at the next 10 years worth of life of PPE, you're going to spend twice as much of that, maybe 3 times, 4 times as much of that on PPE, or you can spend this amount now, and it's a one-off cost, and it's just the maintenance and upkeep of. And sometimes I think it's a case of, it's re-education. It's saying to them, look, just because PPE is the easy option, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best option. And coming at them from a financial point of view, this is the reason why it's going to benefit you if you do it this way. That seems to work better, in my opinion.
Good stuff. Thanks, Claire. Pauline.
Sorry, just trying to find the unmute button there.
That's all right.
I think I definitely agree with what Mike and what Claire are saying there. I think there's a lot of people default to PPE because it is that quick, easy, very visible safety option. You know, they've got a hard hat on, they've got safety boots on, they'll be grand. And that seems to be that what a lot of people that maybe aren't in a safety profession default to. They've got PPE on, it's all good. Trying to change the conversation in our place at the minute. So we're taking on work where we're doing a lot more work at height in customer premises, and the default for the engineering teams and for the project teams is ladders. I'm like, no, you're working in an industrial unit. You can't get a ladder up there in the middle of the place. I mean, what are you going to lean the ladder against? So it's like, okay, invest the guys in getting their iPath. So they are. Let's hire in the MUP. Okay, so it's maybe a bit more cost at the front, but you're going to get the job done on the first day. So you're there, you're going to get it done quickly, on time, right for the customer, less mess, less hassle, more efficiently, all of that. And it's trying to get them to see that a wee bit of investment up front will actually pay dividends down the line. So once you have somebody trained, once you have, you know, a good relationship with a mute power company and they know what kind of things you're looking for, your guys get used to the machines, so maybe they don't need as much time for familiarization, all that kind of stuff. It all starts to become cheaper in the longer term, but it's trying to switch that mindset. And it's saying it's scalable as well, and you're depending how complex the task is. So I was having a really interesting conversation with one of our guys yesterday about risk assessment, and he was wanting to talk through his risk assessment, and we were talking about he was going into a customer's premises, and it was customer's home that they were going into, and I went, okay, well, what if they got a dog? How do you manage the risk from that dog? Well, I ring ahead and I ask them to put the dog away, and I'm like, absolutely. How do you make sure that they do that? You remind them when you get there. So talking about all that and how the individual pieces eliminate that risk. That's what you're doing. You're eliminating the risk by putting the dog out of the room. You know, keep it out of your way. So it's trying to get the guys who are actually doing the work to understand that hierarchy as well, so that they just don't think PPE. I've got my lid and I've got my boots on. I'm grand, but actually through, right, how can I keep myself safe? How can I go home in one piece tonight? And it's that for me is the key thing, is trying to educate everybody all the way through.
Yeah, having that creativity as well, isn't it? And trying to have those conversations, meet people where they're at, and enable you to influence them, I think is really, really important as well. Okay. Great discussion so far, guys. Loving this. So let's carry on with some more thoughts, and then we'll keep going into the wider discussion. I'm going to skip a couple here because I'm just conscious of time. One that's come up in the chat, and I think we should cover, is the kind of economic and practical limitations. So somebody in the chat has said, Julie has said, managers often have few areas of control. Elimination and substitution can involve capital spend or costly alternatives needing more senior manager approval or buy-in, whereas admin and PPE are often within their control. And I do think that is a really valid point. What can we control? What do we have the ability to make decisions on and do ourselves versus what do we have to get a buy-in for? And that's where I think our influencing skills and our business skills, and I talk a lot about profit from safety. How do we get the CFO to understand that safety should be a driver, or is a driver of profit, not a cost? Those sorts of things come in. So cost implications are absolutely something that we need to think about here, because both in terms of the direct cost, but also the opportunity cost. Eliminating a risk, yes, it can have a health and safety benefit, and we might have a lower level of physical harm. But if that causes other types of harm, economic harm, or whatever to the organisation or other people, then that might be something that we perhaps would counsel against. Richard, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, it's a very interesting conversation, and one of the things that stands out a lot for me with the industry where I work, and also when I've attended training sessions myself for keeping my skills up to date, is we have a legacy of telling people that PPE will protect them from all hazards. So somebody starts a place of work on day one and they're told you wear your PPE, it keeps you safe from hazards. And unless we start and be brutally honest with people about what PPE really is, what it is really capable of doing or not doing, we're always going to be making people think they're turning up to work wearing Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man suit, as opposed to boots and a helmet and gloves, face masks, especially in so many environments with dust and fumes and vapors. And most of the time I see them protecting the top of people's heads as opposed to the lungs. We've, both as a safety profession and as management within businesses, have got to do a much better job of explaining to people why PPE is there, what it's protecting people on top of what other controls are already there. But we've also got to explain the context to them. We need to start and talk to them in a different way, to say to them, the reason why I want you to wear your safety glasses this week is because your daughter's getting married on Saturday. Do you want to see her walk down the aisle? Or do you want to be sat there with somebody else telling you what's going on with two bandaged eyes and you're looking humiliated in front of everybody else? Because again, people think, I'm only going to wear PPE if it's stylish, if it's trendy. No, it needs to function correctly. It needs to fit correctly, and it needs to do the job it's designed to do. Nobody's wearing PPE to be walking down a catwalk in a Milan fashion parade.
That's very true. I guess if you're in the hospitality sector, let's say you're a waiter or a waitress, and the risks are lower of physical harm than in your industry, for example, then perhaps there's a slight argument towards these kind of slightly more fashionable things. But I suppose the reality is that nowadays we should be able to achieve form and function. So there shouldn't really be an excuse, certainly when it comes to safety footwear, for people to get this wrong. From a practicality perspective and a performance perspective, we should be able to achieve good slip-resistant soles on shoes, irrespective of what sector we're in, and if we can, and make them look good enough that people are happy to wear them. You'd hope, anyway.
I fully agree with all of that. Absolutely, that we can make things look better. And again, another area where the PPE profession and every industry that uses it is going to improve. It's the ability to have it for the right shape and style to fit people of all sizes, and especially looking for in construction and other heavy engineering industries for PPE and RPE around the fit and function for women.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. Sterren's put a great comment into the chat here, which is it's interesting that we're discussing PPE rather than how we shift the focus to elimination/substitution. If we don't shift our focus, how can we expect our teams to shift? And that is exactly right. And that's kind of where I am wanting to take this, because I think the reason we're talking about PPE is because historically we've gone down that route. I say we as a very broad brush phrase. And I suppose my key takeaway is that we, as in the people on this call, we need to, as you've exactly said, shift the focus towards elimination and substitution, and because that's what is actually going to make a real difference. Just another couple of points I was going to make. The hierarchy, I think one of the challenges could be that it neglects this kind of safety culture piece. We spoke about safety culture last time on the roundtable. And what we're not talking about in the hierarchy is how to foster a safety culture. So if we believe that safety culture is important, or culture of safety is important, whichever way you like to look at it, then are we neglecting something by not including something on the hierarchy of controls that speaks to this. And I suppose the last thing I wanted to say is that, again, I'm a fan of frameworks because I think they make things easy to understand, and you can go away and start to consider and ponder. But it is potentially quite a one size fits all approach. So there are going to be industry specific risks. There are going to be setting specific risks where perhaps the hierarchy of controls maybe isn't the right way to go. There are going to be certain scenarios where, like we've already discussed, elimination may not be fully possible because we can't eliminate every single risk if we're being realistic about the world of work and the fact that businesses exist to do whatever it is that they do, whether they're making something or servicing something or whatever it is. So it might not be realistic to eliminate the risk at all times. Think of my area of slips. We can't eliminate the risk of a floor being wet or contaminated if we're operating a swimming pool, for example, or if we're operating a kitchen. That floor is going to get wet or contaminated at points in time. So we can't eliminate that risk. But that's when, if we move down, we could do things like having better floors, having better maintenance regimes, etc., etc. So, we've already started discussing, but those are just some of the thoughts and points that I had. Very happy to take some more interventions and comments and thoughts, and we can discuss further. I suppose, what are your thoughts on this? Does it work for you? Is it that, like we've said, the hierarchy is pretty good, but we're just not applying it well, and we need to do some work on that? Peter, do you want to come on?
Yeah, hello. Just trying to get
Hi.
myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just got myself off of mute and the video. I shared something in the chat that I've used before, which is a strength of defense matrix. First observation here is I think some of the discussion or questions has been around which level of this is right, PPE, which might be too often prescribed, or is it higher up? And I think it's a layered approach. Whenever you do an incident investigation, you realize that there are multiple factors. Some are root causes, some are contributing factors. Some are just like background. So, the idea of this Swiss cheese model, which effective, that there's always multiple things going on at any one time. And it's never usually the failure of just one item. So, you want to build resilience, so you want to build multiple things. And we train people, we do provide them with PPE, we do look to where possible, where things can be eliminated, or you try to replace the higher risk with another. So if you look at this hierarchy, it's not about saying which level along the hierarchy do you want to go. Obviously, eliminating more is better, but the reality is it's multiple. So that was one thing. And then secondly, the strength of the defense approach, and I'm happy to sort of share some slides later on. I can share with you, Christian, and you can distribute further.
That'd be great, yeah.
Is a bit of a recognition of, whichever one of these defenses you put in place, it's good to recognize what are they actually doing. Some of them are eliminating or substituting, like an engineered defense. Some of them might be mitigating. And actually, like this one, it highlights the PPE that says, it shows that PPE can't eliminate, it doesn't prevent. All it's doing is generally it's catching. So you still have the hazard. The hazard still impacts the person. It's just that you're preventing or reducing the impact of, if you've got some gloves, then, hopefully you won't actually get that skin cut, or it's going to be a lot less severe than it would be without. But you're also looking at things, what sort of measures help you detect that there's an issue going on, or to mitigate So it's quite an interesting approach if you're looking at a system rather than just like one individual, but you can look at one individual job. And if you look at a risk assessment that would cover multiple activities, you've got controls. If you take a look at that and say, well, you know, what proportion of my controls are in these different areas, because you want some different levels. So if you realize that more of them are all down in the, oh, it's a procedure and it's a PPE, then you know that's probably not enough level. But administration procedures and PPE are good, but not on their own. You know, then you're relying too much on like the individual rather than other controls.
Yeah, that's really really interesting. Actually, I'd love to explore that in a bit more detail. So if you could send that over, I think that would be great. And one of the things you said there that really sort of chimes with me is that we should be not necessarily using this as a linear model, but instead using it as something that we're trying to put focus in on all of these areas. In other words, we're looking at it holistically. And again, I do think that sometimes we rush into, you know, a PPE control or a signage control, and we kind of feel like that's the answer to everything, rather than looking at all of these levels and doing what we can in a holistic sense. So definitely with you on that one. So if you could share that info with me, Peter, then I'll circulate it, and when this goes out on the podcast, etc., I will include that the link for that in the show notes. Okay, who's next? Oko, how are you?
Chris, I'm great. And you?
What did you want to say about this exciting topic?
Yes, it's good topic, but I have a question that I want to ask because I'm confused and I don't know something that is going on for many companies that I've been to. My question is, with all this, the topics that we are treating, example, let's say, Chris, you are my client, I'm a contractor to you, but you always impose, rules and regulations to me that I have to ensure to comply. But the workers that they are working to you directly, they are not ensured to comply to all the laid down procedures and rules being stipulated when it comes to health and safety rules and procedures that you have been stipulated to manage your company. Your workers that they are not complying to. But me being the contractor, you always ensure that I does the right thing when it comes to compliance. And then at the end of the day, when the year comes to an end and we are trying to, do the lag indicators to see the performance, how we perform for the year, we could see that your workers are the major, the major sources of those who incurred or those who, factor in incidents and then the workplace accident that we recorded. Your workers are the most people who recorded the highest. Then the contractors, we don't record the article. It's still something that is headache to me. That your workers are not, example, you are the client, my client. Your workers that you are working for, they are not complying to the legal rules and regulations that you have stipulated for to manage the company. But me being a contractor, you always put, fire on me to comply, to do everything the rightly, so that nothing happens. But your workers are always people that they have, you see that they have been found themselves that, accidents and others they are source or the cause to that. And it's just something back in my mind. I don't understand. And how can we?
I get you, and I suppose that's an example of where these administrative controls are potentially a bit weak because they are subject to humans doing the right thing. And that could be a systemic problem. Obviously, I don't know your specific business. It could be a systemic problem, or it could be down to individuals making choices that are not aligned with what you'd want them to do. But it does highlight that point that whenever there's a human link, there is a bit of fallibility there. Russ, you've got your hand up. How are you doing? Early start for you.
Yeah, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Christian. Great program. When here in the States, when people think of PPE for walkway safety, they generally go right to slip-resistant footwear. And might surprise many of your attendees that all slip-resistant shoes are not the same. Some have higher levels of traction for different applications. What constitutes a slip-resistant shoe for a restaurant does not mean it's slip-resistant on a construction site. Very different applications and treads. And here in the United States, the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is now reviewing a petition that's going to call for mandating manufacturers of footwear to actually test and properly label the performance, the traction of the shoes that they're selling. So users who are selecting PPE, specifically footwear, will have a better understanding of exactly how much traction the shoes have, number one. And secondly, the application. Is it slip resistant for a restaurant, construction site, hospital? Because right now it's just the wild, wild west. And so I did put in the chat a link if anybody wants to check out what's happening. But this is going on right now here in the States.
Nice. That's great to hear, because, and I suppose that's going to be an interesting one for you guys, because I think I'm right in saying that at the kind of federal level, there aren't many regulations, health and safety regulations. It tends to be state by state. Is that right? So is that going to be a change then?
We don't have anything state by state. It's going to be a federal law.
Yeah.
And so if this petition is approved, and we're pretty optimistic it will, that will mandate under federal law. And it's not just footwear, Christian. The call is to mandate that floor cleaning products and footwear. Those are the three most common contributors to slips and falls. All of those industries will be required to test their products' slip resistance, or what we call traction here in the States, and label them. There's a National Floor Safety Institute series of standards, NFSI standards, which includes labeling, how to properly label the product. And that way the consumer, whether that be you at home or a business, can select a companion cleaning chemical. I don't know if you guys know this, but floor cleaners are notorious for making floors slippery. There was a study done here in the States where 11 out of the 17 most common household floor cleaners, Christian, actually made your floor more slippery after you mop the floor.
Yeah.
In other words, the more you mop, the slipperier it gets. And so we're going to just see if this goes through. We're pretty optimistic it's probably going to happen here in the States. But that way, everyone that's selecting PPE shoes needs to understand the implications, whether or not that shoe works, because it's oftentimes a false sense of security. So check out the link I put in the chat. It goes right to the NFSI's website. You'll see an overview of the standard and everything. It's all pretty straightforward, but we're working on the PPE issue here, Christian, in a little bit different way.
Good stuff. It's great to hear some progress internationally, and that's reminded me of the pandemic, and certainly here in the UK. One of the big challenges we had was people purchased, or the government purchased, huge amounts of PPE from, shall we say, less reputable, less proven suppliers, because of the context of what was going on, and a lot of the PPE turned out to be ineffective, wholly ineffective. So, it does show that we need to focus on the right quality and the right standard of that, if that is indeed where we end up. Just quickly, guys, and I'm happy then to take some more people joining in. Just wanted to share the next Safety Roundtable in 2 weeks' time, where I'll be joined by Karen Hewitt. And Karen recently has done, through her company Leaderlike, a big health and safety engagement survey, and she's had a few hundred people take part in that. And so in a couple of weeks' time, on the next Safety Roundtable, we're going to be going through the results of that survey and talking about all of the implications, the learnings, the insights, etc. So that would be one to pop into the diary for sure, because I've had a sneak peek of some of the results, and they definitely are interesting. Did anybody else want to come and mention anything about the hierarchy of controls. I've tried to cover stuff from the chat. If I've missed anything and you want to flag it up, then let me know. But I think, I would say, like we've discussed, that we've got to stop turning this on its head. We've got to stop ending up where PPE is the predominant thing we're looking at, and we need to put more emphasis on the control measures higher up, particularly around elimination and substitution, if we can. So that would be the key message for me. Hopefully that's been an interesting discussion for everybody. Thanks for those of you that have joined in. Richard, you wanted to come and mention something else?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. One of the things that I think where PPE or gets given a priority is because there are several regulations in the UK that specifically state that if you've got hazards and risks, as part of the findings, if they're significant ones, as part of the findings from your risk assessments, you need to tell the employees what they are. And I wonder if at times people are just generically thinking, if I tell them I've got a hazard and a risk, they're going to go and run away and not want to work for me. So I think, again, part of the conversation has to be around the, and I'm going to use this word advisedly, competence of their knowledge of health and safety roles and responsibilities of a lot of people in management. If they don't feel that they can competently talk around what the hazards of a process are or a piece of machinery and what they're doing to keep people safe, people automatically assume, as again reference to this Iron Man costume, that the PPE actually makes up for that shortfall. And it's one of the things I find a lot when I'm delivering training at the moment is there are so many people in all levels of management, from supervisors right through to CEOs and MDs, who don't actually know that they've got health and safety responsibilities. And it's cascades back down to the management teams, or the management teams don't want to accept that they have these responsibilities for looking after their team members. It just becomes too easy to go straight to PPE. Sometimes PPE does have to be used where there are complex situations where other engineering controls can't deal with it sufficiently. But a lot of the times it makes you wonder about what are people telling and what are people's own knowledge of their own processes. So I think there's much more to do with management and effective leadership of health and safety. And if that improved, maybe we'd see better conversations around what's going on with engineering controls higher up the hierarchy.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there, Richard. Thanks as always. Naomi, how are you doing? Well, it looks like Naomi's frozen just as I've asked her to come and speak. Yeah, it looks like Naomi's frozen. Well, and she normally does a good intervention as well, but sadly it looks like I'll have to miss that for today. Well, look, guys, appreciate your time. Thanks for everybody joining in the chat. Thanks for everybody coming on board and sharing your views. As I say, I think that there's work for us to do, as Richard just said as well, around this area. But we've all got the right attitude towards this. We're looking to learn. We're looking to make the world a safer place. Let's go away, take some of the lessons from today, implement them in our businesses, and see if we can do just that. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great day.